back again. Once again, I'm your moderator for today, Jehan Chu from Kenetic. We're really excited to be able to talk about adoption and integration. I think one of the most important discussions we can have in the Handshake ecosystem and really in blockchain and crypto generally. We're excited to be able to have a number of really qualified and expert speakers here. And just, I guess, going around the table, we have David from CS Skynet, we have Greg from Akash, and we have Yuriy from Puma browsers. So welcome, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. I think my role here, you guys are incredibly technically knowledgeable and can really address a lot of the issues and the challenges and the roadmap ahead for Handshake adoption from that perspective. So I'm really just going to try and get out of the way. Maybe we can start off by just going around the table and saying just who you are, what you do, and then kind of just a few notes about how you're thinking about Handshake. David, can we start with you?
Sure. So my name is David Vorick. I've been working in crypto since 2011. It's been a decade now, and these days have been focused entirely on a platform called Skynet. It's I would say like an upgrade to AWS. People, when you use Reddit or YouTube or Instagram, all your data ends up on some other cloud and in the hands of corporations. And we've developed a system that allows you to remake these platforms, except where you control all of your data. And we're really excited about that. And Skynet itself works entirely in public keys and hashes, which are not super friendly to just normal human usage. That's where Handshake comes in. We can use Handshake to translate this ugly 46-character hash into a name like Skyfeed. And so in terms of just making all the cool stuff we're doing at Skynet accessible and very user-friendly, Handshake has been a total lifesaver, and everyone in our community, everyone making something interesting has a Handshake name associated with what they're building. It has been almost 100% invasion of our community.
That's awesome. Hopefully it's more of a cross-pollination than an invasion, but glad to see that there's mixing and matching.
Hi, folks. My name is Yuriy, founder of Puma. Our tagline is Web3, exploratory Web3 browser. The idea is really simple. We believe that internet kind of works and it's only going to grow, and our lives are going to be deeper and deeper entrenched online. And browser is your window into that world. And if you look at the UI, if you look at the features of the browsers in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of innovation. But also if you squint at it, there hasn't been as much. And I come from developer relations. I'm a developer. To me, most problems are a developer platform problem. And I think the web is the biggest one. And the project started as a curiosity. I was back in crypto. I first started back in 2012, and then I was back in crypto in 2018, poking around Ethereum, poking around Solidity, a lot of smart contracts. To me, it pretty quickly became obvious that, at least at the time, I think there's more attention now to the user experience and the end user, kind of like how can people actually use the project. But a few years ago, there wasn't so much focus on that. And we also believed in interoperability. I wasn't sure at the time, like I don't have deep investments or almost any, if anything, in one particular network or token, which I think is interoperable. The future is multiple chains doing different things. And that's how I found out about Interledger protocol. That's how I met Stefan and a bunch of other people. And I met Greg as well through Stefan and that kind of ecosystem of interoperability, and started building Puma. The idea was very simple. We want to make payments seamless. So we started with micropayments with Coil and Interledger protocol. We're working on the identity. Handshake is just a curiosity thing. I met Jehan, and in a slightly cliche way, we used to both work out at Equinox in San Francisco, when that was a thing. But he's awesome. We also met at the Decentralized Web DWeb camp, and so we just get to know him, and then over time, I just started poking more around Handshake, and seemed very interesting. I also got to meet David a while back as well. I think Saya is an extremely underrated project in the crypto space. So it's really excited to be part of this panel here.
Great, thanks, Yuriy.
Yeah, good to see you, Yuriy, again, and Jehan. My name is Greg Osuri. I'm the founder for Akash Network, and I lead the development efforts there. Akash, in its simplest term, it's the world's first open source cloud. It is a computation network that's decentralized and permissionless and non-custodial, right? So it's very complementary if you think about in the decentralized web ecosystem, what you guys are doing at Skynet, provide storage. Akash would be a complementary product on top of that that'll consume the storage and add a computation layer on top of that. And Handshake is an amazing fit into the entire puzzle of a decentralized stack where it resolves the IP addresses given by Akash. So really, I think why Akash? Because, to really think about what the current cloud is essentially an oligopoly controlled by four major providers. That control about 81% of the market share. And a lot of these providers were created for an era that's not current, right? So these, if you look at AWS, is about 15 years old. And over time, these providers got misaligned with a developer. And today we have an arcane tool set. So Akash is really an answer to the needs of a modern developer at a price point that's set by a market wherein 85% or so of compute capacity in data centers remain unused. So creating an open marketplace that's accessible to everyone at a price point that's probably 2 or 3 times lower is a promise of Akash, and I'm really excited. Another fun fact is Akash means the sky in Sanskrit. So AkashNet could also mean the Skynet. So there's that relation as well. So just call it coincidence or whatever, but here we are.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Yuriy, why don't we kind of come back to you for a second? I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were the first browser to integrate Handshake.
Yeah, I totally forgot the which conference we're at.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
that's the headline, buddy. That's the headline. So you're the first one to integrate Handshake. Can you tell us about how was that process? Why you decided to do it, and where you kind of see it going for Puma? And
so there's I think Handy Browser is the first desktop browser technically to be supporting Handshake, and we're the first mobile browser to natively support it. And we're also today, full transparency. Today it goes through Gateway. Mobile performance, latency, all those things are a concern. This is the first kind of preview of Handshake support. So it goes through hns.to. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to take a first step in envisioning what the end user experience would look like, and how easy can we make it for people to just download one app and be able to access their Handshake domains. And I think that's the number one goal. We're hiring, by the way, and we're actively working on adding HNSD and at least client and maybe the full node eventually into the browser, so that you can access the truly decentralized kind of features of it. But the first step is basically a prototypical implementation that's already been working really well. I think one thing that when we started Puma, one of our taglines was deeply focused on privacy, and we still believe in privacy. We believe your browser has no business knowing your browsing history. It's very important. It's very personal, and there should not be a financial incentive to know anything about you. But at the same time, privacy is very hard to demo, and it's very hard to measure. It's very hard to except for just long-term building out the trust with the community, there's not as much you can do on that side. With Handshake, the response of the community to us implementing even the preview has been phenomenal. There's people who have emoji top-level names. There's Nicole, who's writing an amazing content for getting started with crypto, and her URL is just Nicole /. And if you go to a browser, being able to type in your name, hit / like Tishan did with D-Links and other things, it's just been so exciting. It's so much creativity, and including somebody recently registered HNS for Terry Crews and passed it on to him as a gift. And Terry set up the D-Link as well there. So it's just there's so much creativity happening there that I think we every time we look at the roadmap from a pragmatic kind of business perspectives, or we talk a lot to investors and then they're super skeptical about certain directions and we get sad. But then when we talk to our community and to the users and we see and we follow the curiosity path, just like I did when I started Puma, so many amazing things start to happen and start to click. And so I think it's really amazing to see the community step up so heavily and explore and create some new things. And then things that Namebase folks have been shipping recently are just phenomenal. The preview of the identity setup for for your logins and otherwise. That's I think that's actually remarkably I think that's going to be big. We are actually overdue to catch up with David and also Greg as well on some of those things. We'd love to have deeper support for Psi and things we can do, especially on the token sharing. There's some interesting problems on as a side effect of fighting towards third-party cookie tracking. You're also starting to get to the point where legit good applications are having trouble maintaining state of users, and so I think there's a lot of open problems, and we're just starting on that path.
Great. David, pinging back over to you, thinking about, obviously kind of Psi was one of really the kind of earliest integrators as well. So many things are kind of transporting over. And as you mentioned, even a lot of people in your community are integrating Handshake into what they're building. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, where does it come from? How are your developers, how are your community viewing Handshake if they're not already in the Handshake community? How are they looking at the kind of two stacks next to each other in terms of application building and the future of application?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think the main thing right now is just the ability to put human readable names on top of your application, because then you can share links that people will be able to remember. There's also, in smaller part, some exploration of using Handshake as usernames. And actually, I don't know how well that's going to scale, because I think Handshake has a limited number of names they can allocate per block. And so if we get 100 million users who all want a Handshake name, that might. So I don't know if that's going to work out. But in terms of naming applications, I do think that there's enough space. Applications aren't nearly as common as users, and so there should be enough space to do that. So I think that's the main thing that we've been excited about. And then, of course, just in general, I think there's a lot of energy around getting away from, I would just say overlords is a good term. There are people out there that decide what we're allowed to say, what websites are allowed to exist. And almost I feel like there's starting to be a generational gap where the people who control these systems are kind of out of touch with what the new technologies need and what we want. And so just anything that gives us alternate avenues to express ourselves has been just very exciting and very welcome, because I do think that most of our infrastructure is out of touch with our needs, and we want to thrive. We want to create space for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's quite important. I love what you said about the generational gap. I haven't really thought about it from decentralization as a cultural awareness for this generation, but I think increasingly it is, and it's an important point to make. Greg, over to you. What do you think are some of the kind of larger challenges that Handshake has for kind of broader integration and adoption? Obviously, I think that what Puma browser is doing and what Handy browser has done is a start. There are a lot of conversations all over the space about trying to push browser integrations and further kind of DNS resolver integrations. But from your perspective, what's holding back kind of Handshake in terms of adoption?
I think it comes down to more awareness, right? Like people that are aware of Handshake, people understand the value Handshake provides, which is a censorship resistance routing network to the globe, right? And I think it's still not very evident for the larger audience about the kinds of things that are happening today with censorship. I mean, before it's no longer just controversial stuff. It's pretty much anything. If you're in crypto, you probably experience quite a bit. And we got shut down recently. Our YouTube channel got shut down. Our Twitter accounts we claimed it back, but it was still a very annoying thing to go through, right? There's this awareness piece. And second, I believe, is the developer focused content in general. Like when I'm a developer, if I'm looking at Handshake, and if I'm not someone that particularly cares about censorship resistance, is there any other way I can leverage Handshake? And I think the programmable nature of the DNS is less obvious, and that's really what's exciting for us. Handshake is not a centralized entity; it's extremely programmable, and that's really exciting for us. And you can use a discovery layer DNS provides, but a lot many applications other than just pure web routing, right? So I think exploring and like USRV records, you have like a whole lot of things you can actually use DNS for. I've traditionally used DNS for load balancing and a whole lot of other things from a developer standpoint. And kind of exposing and making those features more available and more, getting more developers in front of this could actually increase adoption. And we're looking at developer first style here. And some of the things that we're looking forward to doing with Handshake is, a challenge now with Akash is every time you have a fault tolerant event, you could have an IP address change because if the provider kicks you out, you can go to a new provider and get a new IP address. In an essence like that, I mean, the DNS doesn't really change, right? So it'll be phenomenal to integrate Handshake, when every time there's a new IP address, you can actually register that with your domain, which again resides in a censorship resistant layer that your users can get to.
Thanks. That's great. How do you feel about the kind of developer tool set? I mean, in terms of, obviously it's a very, as you mentioned, developer first type of approach, and Handshake in many ways is no different. In one sense, we see kind of these different areas. We see, the domain name speculators and kind of domain name bidders, really kind of taking the charge, leading the charge on the price and the signal and that kind of front end. But on the back end, how's it going with kind of developer adoption of Handshake? This is more an open question to all of you. I mean, what are you seeing out there in terms of like improving kind of tool sets and such to make it easier to develop on Handshake and integrate with Handshake, and what's needed?
I think, it's not yet there. I mean, this is an area of high passion for me. When I look at Handshake and when I look at how to use Handshake, it's not very obvious from a developer standpoint, or how do you build on top of Handshake, right? I think adding some sense of clarity there and adding some content there, like guides and whatnot, will significantly, could actually contribute to developer adoption. And secondly, also building or extending Handshake, not to the core protocol, but the tooling around it, to address some of the discovery problems people have while building infrastructure tools, could give an additional or a different view as to how you look in an open source DNS system. And I'm actually working on a new series called Demystifying DWeb, where I really want to. And the third thing is, how do you sort of like make it frictionless to integrate with the rest of the platforms, right? The integrations are huge. If you look at integration, framework-based integration path for a lot of the development tools, it's a very straightforward, success framework, right? So, Akash integrating Handshake, so that the users of Akash will have a lot of frictionless, registration experience or resolution experience on Handshake, or even SIA and Skynet integrating Handshake. And really giving those channels for Handshake to acquire those developers, I think could be a big boost as well.
Great, thanks. David, any comments on that?
Yeah, so I have two, I guess, classes of thought. So the first is that one of the things that's on our to-do list that we haven't gotten to yet is so the Skynet portals already run Handshake full nodes, which means if you supply them with tokens, you can transact on the Handshake network. And so we could create an API directly in Skynet that allows users to update their Handshake names, or even go as far as like buying new names or doing other sorts of trades. And so one of the things that we would really love to do is give applications a direct way to interact with Handshake just from this, like just from the user's client page. And then, so that's something that's on our to-do list. I think we have a bunch of other stuff in the way first. But I think that would really improve not only how much people use Handshake, but also just like the overall decentralization, because you're using Handshake through a portal instead of through something like Namebase. And then the end user doesn't really have to worry about acquiring Handshake, because that's happening again at the portal operator level, acquiring HNS tokens, because that's happening at the portal operator level. So that's something we definitely got our eye on, and seeing how we can make just API endpoints within Skynet itself that integrate better with Handshake. And then kind of on the more critical side, I think something that we've found that I think initially surprised me, and in hindsight it feels inevitable, but I think that when it started happening, we were all kind of surprised, which is that Handshake has this very, I'm going to say, clever game theory system, where when you're bidding for domains, there's a bunch of game theory that when both sides are playing optimally, the result is that everybody bids what the name is worth to them, and then they only end up paying what the name is worth to the other person. So you kind of you pay as little as possible, but the thing gets priced correctly at the end of the day. And it's actually like pretty sophisticated. People often don't know what they're willing to pay for something. And like, so we've seen multiple instances of someone being like, yeah, I'd pay $10, and then some scalper grabs it for $15, and they're like, no, you'll pay $300. Then they're like, maybe I would pay $300. Like now I feel bad because I lost it, and you like get this emotional component. And so like the lesson here is that the scalpers know the game theory, they know the emotion, they know the dynamic, and so they're actually really good at fleecing our users. And because there's this big 2-week window, or one week for the bidding process for scalpers to kind of get in the middle, that just gives a lot of opportunity. And I think there's actually a very substantial unfair advantage in favor of scalpers that is even worse than the way ICANN does domain sales. Because it's not a problem with the game theory, it's a problem that the users don't know game theory and don't know themselves. They don't realize how much something's worth to them. But the scalpers do know how much something's worth to them, because they've fleeced 100 users so far. They have a really good feel for it. So yeah, I think what I would like to see is Handshake change it, so it's a simple either you just post that you're going to buy a transaction, you get it in one, or you're going to buy a name, you get it in one block. There's no bidding at all. Or maybe if you want like one layer of protection, do like a commit reveal. So you commit to buying a name, but you shield it so nobody knows which name you bought. And then 6 blocks later, you show, this is the name I bought, and here's the proof that I pre-bought it. And if no one comes up and says, oh, we did it first, then you win the name. And so I think that gives you, I think that would be it would result in more users getting the names they want for cheaper, and less scalpers getting a bunch of value out of users for playing the game better. So yeah, that's something I've seen on the ground a lot. Like 80% of bids go this way, I feel like.
Got it. Pinging over to you, Yuriy. Going back to the subject of kind of the tooling and the kind of integration. How was your experience, and what do you want to see kind of better going forward? How can the kind of developers in the community add to it? I saw that you were posting about having more educational materials, and I totally agree with that. I mean, this is officially like a call for kind of community content to start populating and start kind of flooding the airwaves with better guides and more kind of information. But
yeah, I think like funny story about what David was mentioning. By the way, somebody sniped my my last name Dybskiy, which is impossible to spell. And like aside from me, I don't know if anybody would ever want the TLD. I'd love it for my family, but I was able to buy it back through an offer system that folks Namebase did. So I think Namebase is doing an amazing job of advocating for Handshake community and creating great materials. A way for an airdrop, for example. I'll be honest. I'm a reasonably decent developer when I get to sit down and actually build things. But using the official guides, I had trouble claiming my airdrop as a which also, by the way, like doing an airdrop for active GitHub developers, I think is a phenomenal thing that the original Handshake team did, because it attracted a lot of builders. And I think encouraging builders to build is a really great way to get more materials. But definitely, educational materials are lacking in all sorts of direction. We've there's the forbidden term in the last few weeks has been NFTs, and everybody's been there's like so many mentions of it on all sorts of platforms and everywhere that people are starting to ban it. But it's also, I think, important and interesting to see. This is not directly the question you asked, but Hello Kitties, for example, a lot of people were saying this is not truly decentralized. This is not, necessarily like, a way for you to own the asset, because you can only view the kitty on one website. So there's questions there. But from an educational perspective, from an entertainment perspective, I think that was really awesome for getting up to speed with those concepts. And if you've seen the Crypto Zombies, which is the Solidity tutorial of how to get up to speed with Solidity, having more games like that, having more kind of like fun projects, I think is really important for the ecosystem. And that's where I think the unfortunate balance that David mentioned. There's the scalper angle, which is if people have financial incentive, things could grow, but there's a side effect to that. And then there's the fun curiosity gaming perspective, which I think is something much more exciting. I would love to see more games there. And if somebody could fund more of that development, that would be pretty awesome, I think.
Yeah, I think that having more games would be definitely interesting. And I wonder if anybody's out. Have you guys heard of anybody making kind of games or any other type of interesting applications? I guess I'm actually really curious from the application standpoint, other than what you guys are doing. What are some other interesting ideas or applications that you've seen in the wild that you think could potentially, drive adoption or kind of more easily bring Handshake to the masses?
It was huge. I mean, it worked out really well for us, especially with Akash. We had at the last testnet we released had about 480 monthly active developers. And a lot of them, and when we have this shared catalog, community curated catalog called Awesome Akash, that attracted over 100 applications, people creating different configuration files and sharing with other people and doing different unique things and sharing with other people. And a lot of that, I think, is attributed to the incentivized testnets we had. That worked out really well for us.
Just out of curiosity, you were able to incentivize them because you guys have a treasury, right?
Yes, we had a treasury, and we also have a community pool that's managed by a governance proposal.
In the Handshake ecosystem, like there is no treasury, right? There's just what people have, and there's just what people mine. Can you think of any ways, or have you guys thought of any ways to kind of solve this particular problem where there's no kind of community money, there's no community pool, right, to drive this? It's each their own. Any thoughts on that, on how to kind of drive these incentives or to promote support without actually a built-in budget?
Yeah, I think you should build in a budget. So we recently split the Saya network. So Saya, just a little history, was previously entirely VC funded. There was a for-profit corporate entity that did all the development, had a go-to-market strategy and a revenue strategy. And at some point, we kind of realized this was not sufficient at addressing all the needs of the Saya network. And so we were faced kind of with the same question that you guys face now, which is all these things that are super valuable, but we can't nail down an ROI, right? If I can't go to the board and say, these 12 engineering months will return the money that we spend on the 12 engineering months, the board's going to be like, no, you can't spend our money that way, right? And so we split out a nonprofit entity, gave it a block reward, gave it a charter that, driving the mission and on the health of the network. Now the Saya Foundation, and of course it's not, or the Saya network has an entity that's, not under my control. It's not for profit. There's no profit element, that has a budget that can get stuff done. And so things like, why haven't you maintained the wallet in 2 years? Well, now there's a budget, and like we can hire devs, or not we, but the Saya Foundation can hire devs to maintain the wallet more properly. And I think that this is very new. The Saya Foundation, I think, has been incorporated for 3 months, maybe 4. So it's very fresh. We can't definitively say that it worked out super well yet. But I'm very optimistic. The fork went off without a hitch. There's always a little bit of contention, but I think in general everyone agreed it's better that there's a budget for the health of the network than it is that there's no pre-mine or the other sorts of FUD terms that get thrown around. And so I encourage Handshake to move in the same direction. I think it would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, but I think that'd be great. But one issue is that you are aligned with the foundation and the kind of company itself, whereas Handshake. So we've done this, we've created this DWeb Foundation, but we don't have any authorization, right? So if we were to try and build in a block reward or propose an adjustment to the code to build in a block reward for the foundation, who's to say like that it's our foundation that gets it, right? Because there is no designated foundation. There's a connection between the code and the foundation in other chains that would allow that. So how would you kind of think about making? I think it's a great idea. And I do a little bit of mining, and I would be up for that. But I want to know, how do we designate who actually gets it and how it's determined, I guess.
Yeah, so I would actually say just normal vanilla social consensus. I don't think DAOs are quite to the point of sophistication where it makes sense. I think there are too many things that can go wrong, and it's too hard to pull off. So let's wait on the DAO until DAO technology is better. Maybe one day it'll get there, but at least for us, and I think, I think you actually overstate the connection between the company and the software. We're decentralized like anything else. We don't have the ability, and we never have had the ability to push updates to users. So if we introduce a hard fork, we really have to politic the thing, basically convince people that they should upgrade, convince people that it's the right move. And give people, an opportunity to become comfortable with it, and also like engage with them, hear concerns, and adjust the planning based on the ecosystem. And so I think that you guys would just be in a position of talk to all the exchanges, talk to all the miners, talk to all the major developers, talk to all the Twitter figureheads, talk to everyone who has mind share within the Handshake ecosystem, and it's just this big political game. Get them all rallied around the same final foundation. Figure out who can you put in the foundation that everyone's going to be like, yes, this is better than the status quo. And so I think it is like politically is a lot of work, and for us it was also a lot of work. But I think that. I definitely think that the politics are viable, and I think the argument for having money is much better than not having money for the ecosystem. It's just a matter of figuring out who do you trust to manage that money, and what sort of rules do you attach to their management of the money. And if you use a nonprofit foundation, you can attach legal like a legally enforced responsibility, and if they violate that responsibility, they can in the worst case go to jail, which I think is, it's not decentralized, but it's powerful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great suggestion. Greg, were you going to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, a big question for me about Handshake is how the governance is done. I don't even know if there's a governance module. I mean, social consensus on chain works phenomenally. It worked phenomenally for us, and I think it worked phenomenally for a lot of projects. If you look at what Cosmos is doing, and if you consider on-chain governance and Cosmos and Tezos, what they're doing, right? I think there's a lot to be learned there, and it's also presents another challenge as to how it's a proof of work system, so not really clear as to how that would work, an on-chain governance model. But governance is very critical for early projects like Handshake, and I think the assumption that a decentralized network will take off on its own without getting that help or that lift in the early days is a fallacy. So I'd love to see more governance and more effort towards that, and governance can solve lots of problems about capital distribution and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yuriy, any thoughts on this governance side of things, or in terms of this whole idea of being able to financially support Handshake?
One, I'm an outsider to Handshake, so I'm still new and I'm still learning. It's been interesting how hard it is to actually know, or even talk to somebody from Handshake. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, who do I talk to about Bitcoin? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of a joke.
But that's a feature, not a bug, right?
Exactly. I was like, that's actually a feature that's not a bug. I think having companies like Namebase run certain things is great. We need to think more about it. Like for us personally, like for Puma, so far we've been a kind of like a much more traditional kind of like startup like structure, where we're Delaware C Corp. We raised a little bit of funding, a little bit of bootstrapped, and kind of like building it as a traditional company. But I think this from a community perspective, there's so much you can do when kind of like people like we started with let's not have a token in the browser. Like we don't think it makes sense. I think it needs to be a much more careful design. At the same time, we're big fans of Brave, and they've done a really great job. And you have different budgets when you can have this kind of like portion of the block allocated to the foundation or to the grants program. It seems that there's some convergence. There's been a lot of experimentation. I think we need to look into the things that worked really well and go with it. But I think also early on, there's I think often a little bit too much like premature engineering on the technical side or organizational side, where if the decision making is really hard, then the system will actually have a smaller chance of being adopted if it can't innovate, if it can move faster, to make sure that the people using it are happy. And so I think there's a balance to be had. And then I think the term people are starting to use in this case is the progressive decentralization. So you start with a little bit more centralized approach, and you progressively move forward to a more decentralized community and have more people involved. I think that's a great way to do it. And again, I think I wish somebody would do a little bit of anthropology on the since the dawn of the crypto industry, like which projects were structured which way, what are the learnings, what are the things that worked, what are the things that didn't work. But I think it's starting to emerge very quickly, and this is something that David and Greg have much more to say than I do. We are focusing much more on the how can we make it super easy for people to use, to download, to reduce the cognitive load, to reduce the number of steps it needs to sign up for things. But we're also starting to look into much more deeper organizational structure, and should there be a Puma community, Puma token, and things like that, and how if they were to exist, how would they interoperate with other communities like Handshake and others. I think it's a pretty interesting topic.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, after Puma goes public and you're a multi-billionaire, you can teach that university class. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. I think we're nearly out of time here, unfortunately. So maybe we can start to wrap up and just take last thoughts from each of you in terms of what you'd like to see next, or what you're building next in terms of Handshake. How you're thinking about the next 6 months roadmap in terms of any further features or any further integrations, or things that you'd like to see, things that you'd like to see other people build in Handshake. We'll start with you, Greg.
Yeah, like I said, in the next 6 months, we are contributing to the IBC, the Cosmos IBC protocol, and we also maintain the relayer. So interoperability is on our radar over the next 1 year, and DNS and storage, as a matter of fact, happens to be a top priority. So in that sense, I would love to see us making progress on auto registration of your subdomains or your second level domains with Handshake. We also have a TLD, AkashNet, so we look forward to actually giving subdomains under AkashNet, and the challenge is really figuring out how to do this in a decentralized way, maybe using a threshold signature way. So I'd love to see that come to fruition. It'd be great to have human readable names instead of IP addresses. And that also speaks to the broader effort we're envisioning as Akash being the decentralized gateway to the decentralized cloud. And in an ideal role, I'd love to see one token. We love to interoperate with every other dCloud or decentralized cloud network in a frictionless way, where you could use any tokens that we interoperate with to pay for services for any of the integrated services. Like you should be able to pay for storage using a Akash token, and you should be able to pay for compute using Saya token, right? And vice versa with Handshake. So that's really the vision and the dream we're chasing, and Handshake and Skynet happens to be in that path.
Great. Yuriy?
Yeah, very excited. So we made the first step of HNS preview. We'd like to have a deeper integration with proper light client and full client. on the Puma side. Jehan was actually running one of the previous sessions, and somebody in the chat said that they're looking for like they're open to helping us build it. So we're chatting already with these who might help us build it. We're actively hiring iOS, Android engineers. If you're excited to build towards a more decentralized future on all this axes, please reach out to me. For us in particular, the support, like we'd love to again like sync up again with David to see what we can do on the SIA side. I know some folks from the ENS spoke earlier today in a more engaging, fun conversations with much more tension. I think it's important to have support for all the popular systems. We'd like to have better support for ENS as well. It's pretty embarrassing how long we've gone without having a proper Ethereum wallet, which we'd love to add as well. And then continuing on the web monetization side, I think the ecosystem has been growing. Interledger protocol, I think by design has been really awesome. We need more things like that. I've been heads down building, so getting up to speed on what's happening on the IBC side, on the Polkadot ecosystems, I think is very interesting. Just in particular with web monetization, I think one thing that I think a lot of other projects could learn from that approach is that targeting JavaScript developers and targeting kind of like an audience that is technical but not necessarily as deep. Like the crypto is still hard to use. There's so many different layers and so many different things you need to learn that I think making things a little bit more safe and approachable would be an important priority. But you know, having an identity built into your browser is a pretty important problem that we'd like to tackle the right way. And there's different approaches that we're exploring. We'll be announcing soon. And then there's some other search engine partnerships where we'll be announcing soon that we're really excited about. There's been a big tailwind for privacy first projects on all fronts, and we're really excited to make them accessible on your iOS and Android phones.
Great. And David, last thoughts?
Yeah, I guess kind of going into the theme of what we're working on. I think the three biggest things on our mind right now are monetization. We would love to see people publish pages and then get paid as people visit them, and that's actually, I think, within a month we're going to have that live. So it's very close at this point. And then another thing that's been very big on our minds and for our team is discoverability. So if people are doing things on Skynet, making apps on Handshake, if there's activity, how do I know about it? I think one of the things we've seen is that the Skynet ecosystem right now is a lot bigger than most people realize, but also when you're like, oh, great, show me all the things that are happening, it's kind of a little like, and that's something that we hope to have solved very soon. We're working on some stuff that will make it a lot easier for you to kind of like the stumble upon internet days. If you're like, what's happening? Or almost like a Reddit for decentralization. You can see what's happening. And then finally, just in general interoperability. We're big believers in like the single global identity. So once you log into Skynet, it serves across 9 different apps, but at the same time, it's all secure. It's all pub key based. Nobody gets your private key. And so as you go to 7 different domains, they're all accessing different data. They can't like crosstalk. They can't steal each other's data without user permission. And so that's something that's also, we already have that a little bit in the form of SkyID, but we found a much stronger way to move forward with that. And so we hope to announce that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I think that's kind of where we're focused for the time being, but certainly very busy. My whole life is writing product announcements at the moment.
Awesome. Well, great. Incredible conversation, guys. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for the Handshake community, and best of luck to all of you, and Akash and Saya and Puma. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jehan. This was fun.